Mr. Attorney General, I want to make sure I understand your testimony today and the facts as well. You've indicated today that you were not aware of any gun walking at all until you were briefed in, it looks like, 2001. That would have been either January or February of 2011?
Yeah, January, February 2011.
And you're specifically speaking of gun walking, not just Fast and Furious?
No, I didn't become aware of Fast and Furious until about the same time period.
Okay, so you were not aware of any gun walking, including wide receiver, prior to the end of January of 2011?
No, I learned of wide receiver actually later on. I became aware of wide receiver as we were preparing documents that were to be submitted to this committee.
And without regard to Mr. Weinstein's memo, which you were not aware of, so you did not know anything about wide receiver. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
No.
So when you said earlier that you were not aware of the term Fast and Furious being used, were you aware at the time of Mr. Terry's death of any investigation or program that was going on as a result of his death?
As a result of his death, I certainly was aware of the fact that there was an investigation into who killed him. There was a criminal investigation that started right at the time of his death, December 14th, 15th. I was aware of that.
And in fact, you testified today that you were notified the date of his death. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that by Mr. Wilkinson?
I don't know. I'm not sure who told me.
If I might refresh your recollection, because in pursuant to some of the documents that we received Friday evening, we did receive some emails, and one of which was an email sent on December 15th. It was an email exchange that began with, from somebody to Dennis Burke, your U.S. Attorney in Arizona at the time, said, "Our agent has passed away." Dennis Burke then forwarded that to Monty Wilkinson, who was acting as your Deputy Attorney, Chief of Staff, I believe, at the time.
Deputy Chief of Staff. Right.
On December 15th at 9:41 a.m., Mr. Burke said, "Not good, 18 miles within." Thereafter, at 10:04 that morning, your Deputy Chief of Staff, Monty Wilkinson, then said in an email to Mr. Burke, "Tragic. I've alerted the AG, the acting DAG, Lisa, etc." Would it then be correct to assume that the way you learned of Brian Terry's death was from Mr. Wilkinson's himself as a result of his statement that he notified you?
Well, he notified me, but I'm saying it's entirely possible that I knew about it before Monty told me.
Okay, and so you'd have no reason to dispute that Monty told you about it?
Yeah, I suppose he did, but I'm just saying that when it comes to that kind, when a law enforcement death, especially involving a federal law enforcement officer, that's the kind of information that gets to me very, very quickly. And
it should.
From a variety of places.
And in fact, to follow up on that, in the email exchange, later at 11:15 a.m. that morning, there was another email from Mr. Wilkinson to Dennis Burke saying, "Please provide any additional details as they become available to you," asking the U.S. Attorney in Arizona, "Please tell us, Mr. Attorney, U.S. Attorney, we want to know more." Later that day, in an email from Mr. Burke, the U.S. Attorney in Arizona, to Mr. Wilkinson, your Deputy Chief, "The guns found in the desert near the murdered BP officer connect back to the investigation we were going to talk about. They were AK-47s purchased at a Phoenix gun store." My question to you, Mr. Attorney General, were you aware of this email exchange? Were you aware of an investigation ongoing that involved a Phoenix gun store, and specifically AK-47s at the time?
No, I wasn't, but what's interesting, you got to listen to what you just said. He said that we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about, which implies that they did not talk about.
Not prior to, but subsequent to, subsequent to the death. Mr. Wilkinson has already told you about Brian Terry's death. Now he's being informed about an investigation involving the slain officer, involving a gun store in Phoenix. Did that not raise any sense of awareness? Did it not raise any sense of intrigue? If not from Mr. Wilkinson, at least from you to say, what investigation then is ongoing?
I was not told about this. I was unaware of this. And unless there was some indication that
I appreciate that, but you've testified today that you are a hands-on manager.
What I was saying was that unless there's some indication that the tactics that we are so against were employed there, all we know is that this was something, this was a tragic event connected to an ongoing investigation. But we don't have
involving a gun store and an AK-47. What else do we have to say? Involving a cartel? I mean, come on. From December 15th until the end of January, you don't learn about a gun-walking operation ongoing in your department? And I'm supposed to go home and tell my constituency that that's the facts? Mr. Attorney General, I have a hard time believing that. And if you are responsible for those underneath your direction, I would assume that those underneath your direction would make sure you are fully informed of all incidents of significance, including an ongoing investigation that resulted, or subsequent to an agent's death.
Right. What I would say is that in the absence of an indication that these inappropriate tactics were used, you have here a tragic death connected to an ongoing federal matter, an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, that happens all the time, too many times. What makes this case, this situation unique are the inappropriate tactics. And I don't think there's any indication that Mr. Wilkinson or anybody else was aware of these tactics until the January-February timeframe, late January, early February timeframe. That is the.
So you made no inquiry as to whether this investigation involved gun walking?
I'm sorry?
You made no inquiry as to the investigation involving Brian Terry's death involved gun walking?
That information was not brought to my attention, so I would not have the ability.
But you made no inquiry.
The
I'm
gentleman's
not asking
time
who
has
brought to your
expired.
attention. You yourself made no inquiry with regard to that.
There was no indication, there was no basis for us to believe that gun walking was at all a part of any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about gun walking or the use of that technique until February. And by February the 28th and early March, I said, guess what? We're not doing gun walking. It took me a month or less than a month to say that gun walking was inappropriate. Brought to my attention, fairly rapid response to say, don't ever do this again.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentlelady